Welcome to Spoofers, the podcast where we talk about random things.
Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Spoofers Lounge. It's been a joy to bring forward so many different types of people so far, and this show is going to be no exception. Today I have someone who you've probably heard of, especially if you live on Facebook like so many of us do. This gentleman has taken mindless scrolling and provides us with something that all of us need. The weather right in front of your face. That's right. Today I have the man himself from the South Metro Weather, Kevin Crouch. Kevin, thank you so much for coming to the show, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Man, I will have to say first off, you have the best, weatherman voice I think I've ever heard. My wife has said, she's like, the South Metro Weather guy, he is a weatherman. That is, you could tell that is your calling,
I learned from some of the best. I learned from guys like Steve McCauley, Troy Dungan, David Finfrock, some of these guys that taught stage presence. Dale Hansen and these guys that I'd watch on the news as a kid. And boy, if you're going to learn how to be on the air, it's going to be from those guys.
Oh, absolutely. But you can just tell, just whenever you're doing the radar and you're going up there and you're talking, you just have, it is a professional, production that you're putting out. And honestly, it's pretty remarkable, that you just think, hey, this gentleman putting this show out and, South Metro Weather, and it's working, it's like, hey, I like this. I like this better than watching Fox 4 or anything,
I'm doing something right. I do have to say Fox 4, when it comes to the Dallas teams, the Fox 4 probably has the best team out there. There'll be a time or two when I'm ready to go to bed and the rain isn't done yet, but I can tell you that Evan's going to be on the air in about 4 hours. So, or really realistically, there's been times where I've said, hey, Evan's coming on the air now. I got to go check Evan out and he'll have you covered from there. But I don't have a big Dallas media budget. I've just been able to put the pieces together the way that people are used to seeing it, and then just kind of take it from there and try to give you what for so long you've come to expect through the TV screen, but through a medium that's going to be more accessible. And I'll say it this way. You can't take a big flat screen TV into the bathroom with you when you take shelter from severe weather. So the phone is a little more accessible when the power goes out. Hopefully your phone is charged, that kind of thing. So we kind of came to find out that social media was a much more accessible, much more consistent medium to get that through when things get rough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, also the times I can say I'm probably like most Texans. I don't take shelter when I need to. They're like, there's a tornado in your front yard. You're going, boy, howdy, we're going to go take a look at it, So we got our phone in our hand that's screaming to take shelter. And my wife and I are in the front deal like, wow, that thing is so close. Look at that tornado going by. Or I want to say, it was in 2023, whenever there was the massive hailstorm. Or it might have been 24 when we had the softball size hail that was falling, and I was mowing the yard.
Mm-hmm.
And out of nowhere, I just felt a smack on my head that, if I probably wasn't wearing headphones, it would have knocked me out cold,
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife, she was in the pool maybe 10 minutes before that. She was in the shower. I wallowed in there with a big old hunk of ice and threw it in there. Like, yep, that's what's falling right now. It was crazy. But it is, I will say though, it's real neat from now you're saying the constant information, the weather alerts and whatnot that, you provide for everyone here in the South DFW Metroplex. And it looks like you started off being just Ellis County weather, correct?
Right. So this started back in 2015, in October of 2015. I started just a Twitter account. I've always been the weather guru for my family and friends, and I got tired of basically typing out the same thing over and over again, and said everybody can go to this Twitter account and follow everything there. I'll just post all the updates there. Everybody can, and this was when social media was still fairly young. And so I just wanted to play with this idea. I had the idea of an Ellis County weather source when I was a kid. That was kind of my pretend TV station, if you will. And that was October of 2015. December 26th of 2015 is when we had the tornadoes that went through our area, most notably starting right around Midlothian up through Glen Heights. That was also the same time there was the large tornado up in the northeast Dallas area,
Oh, yeah.
about 635. Did a lot of damage there. Uh, and that kind of put me on the map because that storm, there was a lot of people that were looking for information about what was going on because there was so much happening in Dallas that those stations were not covering our area as much. So they're looking for information. They found this Twitter account. And back then, Twitter was 120 characters. So I was doing the best I could while I'm at my parents trying to, God forbid, I'm trying to celebrate a holiday. Well, celebrating Christmas with my folks and with the family and running around watching different TV feeds, checking other Twitter accounts, the National Weather Service and whatnot, trying to post updates there. 2 days later, moved over to Facebook so that I could have a little more to work with, and it just blew up from there.
That's awesome. And what year was it that you started doing that you transferred over to the Facebook?
So, well, I transferred over to Facebook 2 days later, so it was December 28th of 2015.
Okay,
So
2015.
right
Okay.
before 2016, jumped over to Facebook, started that, and then it just kind of grew from there. And then it was back in, I believe it was 2023, when we rebranded South Metro Weather, took on Johnson, Hill, and Navarro counties as well. All of this area, you're between two media markets. The Dallas-Fort Worth media market generally looks north. You hear people say all the time, they're not looking this direction. They're looking up towards Tarrant County, Denton County, Collin County, and of course, they're all based in Dallas County, and the Waco market looks south towards Killeen and Temple. So you kind of have these four counties here, this belt here in between the two where there's not a whole lot of consistent coverage. And I had enough people from the surrounding counties that were tuning into the Ellis County source that I thought I might as well just adopt a few and go on from there.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, you're like my source for the weather. It's probably just because you are able to concentrate on in a more specific area is why yours is more precise, I guess you could say. Like your temperatures are always there, and I do it. I like it whenever you're doing the weather, and you're saying, you know what, some it's a 98, but some of you guys might actually get over to 100 or whatnot. And I was like, hey, he's actually you talk to the person, I guess you could say. You relate to the people better a lot more than as you would, as you have your big name meteorologist, at Fox, and he's just spitting it out and he's going because he got a lot more he has to do. He's covering a little more than
Sure.
than what he's doing. But still, I mean, hats off, great job. I mean, absolutely great job. And so we kind of talked about it a little bit, but like, we talked, and I've talked about this before we did it, how I was kind of old school and always used to wait for the weather to come across the news and how this is a great idea. But so what would make you just want to, obviously, as a kid, you talked about having your own Ellis County metro weather type thing. And so just wanted to dive into this. Was it just because, hey, you found an opportunity and just decide this is it. I'm putting all my eggs in this basket. We're going to do this. Or I guess I'm trying to say is like, what would make you want to dive into this feet first?
Well, I have pictures of tornadoes I was drawing at age 6. So weather has always fascinated me. The release of the film Twister helped a little bit, I'm sure, as well.
Oh yeah.
I caught my folks watching that a little bit, and there was some fascination with that. And so I've always had the weather bug, if you will. And social media makes it easier to kind of throw your own content out there. And I think with Facebook, I was doing that to a degree just on my own personal account. And so that's what kind of motivated me. I could probably put weather stuff out there. Nobody else is Ellis County focused. I checked and there's nobody that has this name, if you will.
Yeah.
And so I thought I'd just go ahead and give it a try. And it was all experimental, and I'm thinking this would be a cool hobby. I was working full time at that point. And thought this will be just a fun little thing I can do to kind of exercise that interest, that I had, and maybe put a little more into it. And I never would have imagined that I'd get to the point where I am now. I'm not sure I would have started it if I knew it was going to be this big.
Uh-huh.
It'd be a little intimidating, but certainly, it's been a lifelong thing. I've had other ventures. I've had other things that I've wanted to do. Uh, Never could shake the fascination with the weather and just that instinct that I feel like I have, and the knowledge that I've accrued over the years and those kind of things. It just that combined with training that I had in communication, technology, these different kinds of things. I mean, I can point to multiple life events and things that I past ventures and things that I've done that all contributed to this odds and ends package of
Yes.
of of what I'm doing now.
It's kind of crazy how you're talking about how it's almost like you're set on a certain, and people follow this, like you're set on a certain path, like you go to speech, you have a love for weather and things just start molding and all of a sudden now here you are doing what you love to do. And I would imagine it's not an easy task by any means. It takes up a whole lot of your time just running this.
It definitely can. And Stock Metro Weather is a business as well. So even outside of just the weather coverage aspect of it, which can be, yes, very time consuming, there's the factor of just managing the business and kind of dealing with all of the different facets of that. Those are the things that I'm still kind of learning a little bit about, but uh, you do your research, you kind of get into it, and when it's your own thing, you're your own boss, which is great on some level. The conversation about you getting a raise is not always so easy, but so there's pluses and minuses to it, but uh, it's definitely been an interesting road to kind of figure out how do I take. I'll say it this way: there was a point where I had a full time job working here at Hope Health. Back then it was Hope Clinic,
Okay.
and the weather company was gaining more notoriety and becoming more popular, and it was starting to get to the point where I could not handle both. There would be weather events that would come up while I was at work because weather happens whenever it wants to. And I mean, it got to the point where people are going, "Why don't we have this coverage? You covered this storm yesterday so well, happened after work." So, but the appetite was there for something more consistent, and I saw the potential in it. And I just had to say, you know what, I talked to my wife about it, of course, but uh, I thought this thing just continues to grow, and the only way that's going to happen is if I'm able to open up my schedule and just be available,
Yes.
which was bonkers to think about at the time. But fortunately, we kind of put together a business model and were able to make that happen. I found another kind of part-time gig at the same time that helped kind of facilitate that and kind of make up some of the difference of income while I was growing. And then, like we were talking about right before we recorded, this is my full-time job now. And there are some days, like I told you, where it's 100 degrees outside and sunny, and basically all people want to hear from me, or but really they don't want to hear that, how hot it is going to be. And I can tell you that in the morning, and then there's not really a whole lot to do. So I can spend the rest of the day focusing on the business aspect of it or whatever else is going on. I do work part time with Hope Health as well, so I can put some energy there. But yeah, there are times where I've been in that office for, I think one time I counted, it was about 19 hours straight but I was covering probably some winter weather event or something. But it is very, very, very time consuming at times. And then there's times where it's pretty slow and I'm able to be pretty flexible with my time.
Okay. That I will say, you're talking about how when it's 100 degrees, sunny, is it going to change? Every time I look at it, it almost kind of drains your soul. You're like, man, and we have a cold front coming this weekend, and I am just so excited. At first I think I saw the highs, they were going to be in the upper 70s, and I was so excited. And I see it was like slowly start creeping back up, and then I was like, yeah, summer's not over yet.
That's one of the things you have to watch out for. And these weather apps and these different sources, when these cold fronts come through, especially in the summer or in the early fall, cold fronts are going to slow down as they start hitting that hotter and hotter weather in Texas. It's just the way it is. The forecast, when it's farther out, some of these weather models are telling you, oh, yeah, it's going to be great. But that's where the human experience comes in. That's where you have to go, I've seen enough of these things. I know how they act. the forecast on some apps or websites and things might tell you, oh yeah, there's going to be a rock and roll cold front. Things really going to make some things happen. But I know in my head, the closer we get, it's going to moderate, and
Okay.
almost without fail, they do. And so you have a lot of different sources that will tell you how crazy this cold front's going to be, and then by the time you get there, it's just puny.
Yeah, right.
But
You're just kind of like, wow.
right, I mean, if you again, when you have experience doing this, you kind of learn over time. Yeah, it's they're generally going to do that. So the forecast, you're going to be safe, assuming that this thing is going to lose some punch by the time it actually gets here. And if the models stay consistent when you start getting closer, you might have something. But I've always been really good at patterns in school and whatnot. And weather is a whole lot of patterns because you start to see how things act, and generally that behavior starts to get repetitive.
Okay. And also, okay, so like, let's take for instance, your knowledge of, you have your cold fronts coming in, and generally when the colder air is less pressured than the hot air from down south there, correct? So it takes a whole lot more air for it to push the heat down. Is that?
It does, and I mean that has to do with and you've opened the Pandora's box. So
Oh, okay. Okay. I do.
go in the science class now, but
All right.
which side note on that, one of the things that I try to do is educate through my platform, because Steve McCauley at Channel 8 always inspired me by doing that. And I learned that when your audience understands what you're talking about, they understand it more quickly, and they not only do they put trust in you, but at the same time, they see, okay, well, he's not only is he going to tell me, here's what's going to happen, have a nice day. He's going to help me understand why. One of the things that people love to do in Texas is understand why the heck is our weather being so ridiculous. So I do my best to explain it, but when you're talking about the temperature changes, it all has to do with the curvature or well, the tilt rather of the earth.
Okay.
And when it in the summer, we're tilted closer to the sun. So that warm air, that high pressure and that warm air from the south is going to be bolstered. It's going to be stronger because we're hotter. And those cold fronts, by the time they get here, are going to hit that hot air and are going to, that cool air is generally going to warm. It's going to lose that momentum that it had from that cooler air up in Canada and whatnot.
Yes.
So that's why. And we've been very fortunate this summer that we haven't had as much of a stubborn high pressure dome that we usually have.
Oh, it's been beautiful.
We've had some hot days, but you notice that we're starting to get more cold fronts that are making it down here, and we're recording this in the very beginning of September. So naturally, we're going to be seeing the signs of fall, and the days getting shorter, and it's going to kind of, whether summer likes it or not, it's going to force that transition into fall. But yeah, I mean, when you start seeing those cold fronts, when they start either stalling out, where they just kind of hit the Red River and just park there, which is we have one doing that right now. You also can have those that it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. You wake up the next morning, it's just gone
Yeah.
because it hit that dome, hit that warmer air, and that cold front has kind of just fallen apart because it just hit a wall, and there's just nothing. There's not enough push behind it to push it through all of that warmer air that usually is just sitting here over the desert Southwest and the Southern Plains.
So it's just pretty much just like a high pressure wall, I guess you
Pretty
could
much.
say.
Yeah, and that's why you call it the dome. Yeah, that high pressure dome that builds in June and just kind of sits here through August. And like I say, fortunately, we're not having to come down off of such a stubborn ridge. So we're getting into September pretty fortunate. The pumpkin spice drinks are hitting the spot, but I think now
A little better, right?
now that we're not, September often is a lot warmer than people expect it to be. But, we're getting into fall, and for a change, things are actually following the script.
It is. My wife and I were talking about that, and we were like, this is probably one of the more mild summers I can think of, because I want to forget what year it was, but what didn't we have like 90 days straight above 100? Was
So there's two summers that you'll see a lot of records from. And one is 2011.
2011? That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
And then the other, and if you talk to my dad for any amount of time about the summer, he will make sure you remember the summer of 1980. It's just one of those things that he experienced it. And I mean, the numbers are staggering. when you go back and look.
Yeah.
But the sizzling summer of 2011 and the sweltering summer of 1980. See, when you get into the weather mode, you kind of get into your habit of nicknaming things, and the audience usually enjoys that. But those records every year, and I don't know what it's going to take to break one. But I just each summer I just get ready to read off the 1980 and 2011 records. I think the record for today actually was set in 2000, and there was a string of very hot days early in September of 2000.
Okay.
But 1980 and 2011, you look at some of the numbers back in those summers here in North Texas, and it was just obscenely brutal.
Yeah, I remember that's, let's see, 20 I remember I just got out of college. I was out of college for a little bit, and I started my job, being a fleet mechanic, and I was outside, and I lost a lot of weight that summer because I was outside working, and wow, what it was hot.
Probably be a good idea for me too. I had to or figure out time travel. Maybe I'll try that.
You know what? I'll give you a holler. We can go from there, okay?
That sounds good.
Uh, okay, well, I have been talking a little bit before the podcast, but, I grew up in Norman, Oklahoma, and there's tons of, meteorology programs, and, it's almost like every single college student and the University of Oklahoma was wanting to go to the meteorology, and it, it it's almost ironic because there were so many different weather channels and weather stations that you could turn on the news. They're all different and they're all wrong. I mean, they're probably just a college student reading from the forecast, software or whatnot. And they're like, "Yep, this is what's going to happen," and nothing was ever right. And you know, I was kind of wondering, like, how many times have you said, "Hey, I got this perfect"? You go to bed, you wake up in the morning, you're just like, "Oh shit, got that one wrong."
It's happened, and I have one story in particular to share. Evan Andrews up at Fox 4, he's on in the mornings, has become a good friend of mine. He's a mentor,
Oh,
but I'm fortunate enough to call him a friend. And so we were expecting a pretty decent, pretty stout cold front the next morning, and so I went to bed, had my alarm set early, wanted to catch it before it got here, check on the ETA, figure all of that out. Because a nice, decent cold front is always fun to watch and fun to cover. Especially if it's going to arrive, later in the afternoon. I can watch it progress. We can watch it, see what the compressional heating does. Are we going to get any convection? Are we getting get any storms out of this thing? They're fun to watch. So we were watching this progression, and as we went forward, so I can tell you one story where Evan Andrews is a good friend of mine, and has become a great mentor as well. I went to bed preparing for a cold front the next day, and I set my alarm to, try to catch it early. I wake up the next morning and find out not only has it passed, but it was like 4 hours early.
uh-huh.
And I'm going, how does that happen? How does a cold front just, and I forget, I think we eventually figured out, it got, or some kind of an outflow from somewhere else that gave it a push or something like that. Uh, And I wake up and I turn on Evan because I'm like, what is happening? And he's, live on the air at Fox 4. So I turn him on, and I'm kind of watching and I go, this is wild. So I text him and I said, what happened? He goes, yeah, I got here early. Okay. So he's talking on the air about how, we're adjusting our forecast because of this late push in the forecast. So I texted him back and I said, okay, I'm just going to sit here and let you finish yours and then I'll copy off your work and we'll go from there. Cause I was already 4 hours behind schedule on this rogue cold front. And that was a fun day. But one of the other things that can happen sometimes, is, and this especially in the spring and in the fall, but I can forecast high temperatures and then the clouds just will not go away. Oftentimes, especially in the spring, you wake up and there's cloud cover and it burns off about 11 or 12 o'clock or so.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And there have been plenty of days where those clouds hang around until 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock and they can bust my forecast. I can forecast highs in the upper 80s and the clouds, for whatever reason, just kind of hang around a little longer than I expected them to. And we end up in the mid 70s. So there's always little things that can happen to change a forecast. I mean, I can tell you that we're not going to get any storms at all. They're going to stay north of us. Well, it sends an outflow boundary down here that blows up, and all of a sudden we've got storms all over the place. So there are little things that can change your forecast, and that's why a lot of the time you're not going to hear me say exactly what's going to happen. You will hear me say this is what we're expecting and this is why, but you always have to leave a little bit of space for just those sometimes very small features that can make a big difference and change your forecast in a moment's notice.
Oh gosh, I can tell you. I was talking about it changing on a moment's notice. Well, up here in Texas, it changes just when it feels like it. It seems like. But I remember in 2019, and my buddies and I were going. We had a race car. We're going to the races on Saturday nights, and my wife was working at Children's Hospital at the time, and I call her on the way, and she's like, "Well, hope it ain't gonna rain you guys out," because it was a dirt track, and I'm like, "There's not a cloud in the sky." I was like, "Okay, whatever." I bet. And I look, pull up the weather app, 0% chance of rain. Like, okay, yeah, whatever. I bet 5 times that year it rained us out, 0% chance of rain, and the bottom just falls out. It's crazy how just out of nowhere these storms can show up in summertime, and springtime people I guess here are more accustomed to be like, okay, a shower can just show up anywhere, and but yeah, it was just crazy. It's like how you're saying, out of nowhere, just there it is, and all of a sudden now you're in one heck of a storm. It's wild.
That can definitely happen. That can definitely happen. And during the summer especially, people want to know when and where.
Yes.
When is it going to hit? When is it going to get there? Where's it going to go? Especially in the late spring and the summer, sometimes it just depends on where it pops up. There's no way, and I have to put that on. If I don't put on the page word for word specifically, I can't tell you a timeline on these storms. Folks are asking. But, there's some of those circumstances where it just depends on where it pops up. And it can pop up and turn into a downpour very quickly.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. Heck, I remember one time, I'm still going back a couple of years, and I want to say it was like 17 or 18 whenever here in the Dallas area we got all that rain and it never stopped, and the Trinity almost overflowed into 35, and that was some fun times. I bet you were a busy man then.
That's one of the most entertaining parts of this business. There's always stories.
Yeah.
There's always more stories to talk about, and things to look back on. And I can, there are storms that I've covered in the past where I can look back and, oh yeah, I was doing this and it turned out this way. And I mean, weathers will be used for small talk most of the time. So to be able to go back and look at those stories, I grew up always hearing from all the adults, all the fun stories they have from their jobs, and now to have not only to have stories, but to be able to bring up stories that other people can relate to because they have their own experiences through those events, and so it keeps it interesting for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And man, so how many people do you have on your team that does that? Because you post all the time.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way this is just a one-man band here.
So officially, I'm it.
Oh, wow.
I'm the only one in the studio usually. I do have a friend of mine, Matt, up in Midlothian, that he helps on the live streams when he's available. With the comments and he'll listen in on some of the radios and kind of watch some of the other social media chatter and those kind of things. So if you see a little earbud in my ear, that's who is talking to me. But when he's available, he's kind of helping me manage some of the back end stuff. And then, well, I can't not bring up the fact that my wife is kind of running the house while I'm doing that. So she's kind of holding down the fort, keeping the kids fed and entertained and those kind of things, keeping them off my door when they're tired of me being gone, that kind of thing. So I have people that are on the periphery that really kind of, for lack of better phrasing, enable me to do it. They're kind of helping things behind the scenes. But when it comes to on camera and actually in the studio, and especially just those periodic updates, and that's all me.
Okay. That's a lot of work for one guy. That's a lot of work.
There are times where, and I mentioned Evan, he asks me all the time, he says, how do you do this? How are you alive? And people ask me when you sleep, and my only reply is that's a very good question. We have some of these winter storms that seem like they can just go on for days. And I have to strategically sleep because late at night, people are asking, okay, when is it going to freeze? What does it look like overnight? Is school open tomorrow or not? And then early in the morning, the schools, sometimes are waiting until early in the morning. They can get out, test the roads. Then they're announcing. So I got to be ready early in the morning. People want to know about their drive. So there are times in winter storms where I'm sleeping in the middle of the day because school or work or whatever has already been called off. Everybody knows what they're doing for the day.
Right.
Nobody really cares until we start getting closer to 3, 4, 5 o'clock. Okay, time to go home, time to make that commute. What does it look like? Okay, school just called out for the next day. I got to update those. So there are times where sleep is very strategic and kind of just whenever I can make it happen.
I can see, especially the winter storms. I could definitely see that because at night it seems to be obviously the worst part because that's when it's going to be the coldest, and so
Right.
yeah, wow, hats off to you, man. And then on top of that, not just doing all that, but you're having to do all the you're watching all your models, yeah, I'm sure you have tons of tools that you're having to compare to and be like, okay, you're saying that the human element, okay, I can't go off of this, I can't go off of this. We know it's going to probably do this or whatnot. So there's a whole lot more work, and I would say behind the scenes and making a post and be like, yep, this is our weather today. Have a good one, guys. There's a lot.
Yeah, there can be. I mean, like I say, there are times where the weather is fairly simple and it's just kind of figuring out, are we going to cross 100? Are we not? What's the heat index look like? Those kinds of things. When it comes to looking at the models and all of that, that can be tricky. That can be challenging. I mean, I've covered events where weather models 24 hours out, I can have two models that say completely different things and trying to figure out how do I decipher that and how do I trust this one? Do I trust this one? What do I do? I've had times where one of the models, the high resolution rapid refresh, for example, the HRRR, and that's one of the short range high resolution models we have. There's also the North American model, or we call it the NAM, and those two are the prevailing short-term models. What's going to happen in the next couple of days? A lot of the time when it comes to storm timing and where temperature is going to be dropping, that kind of thing, frontal timing, that sort of thing, that short-term stuff, that's usually what I'm looking at. So I've had events where they're both completely different in their conclusions. Okay, what do I then I'll look at the RAP model sometimes and see where that is. Texas Tech has their own model, and sometimes I'll watch that one. I remember a time where one was way over here, one was way over there. Texas Tech was right in the middle. I'm like, so do I just trust the old trusty Texas Tech model, or do I assume that it's just trying to figure out the difference? So it can be rough. And sometimes, like I mentioned before, that's where some of your kind of instincts come into play. And that's where, honestly, you have to be transparent. There are times when I'll post both of those screenshots and say, hey, these models are miles apart, and there's no one prevailing and clear signal one way or the other of which way this is going to go. So I just have to present the facts. I think a lot of these guys that are doing weather information on social media, they're afraid of appearing less than certain. And there is no certainty in weather. And you have to be willing to show your work. I mean, that's what I was taught in school. Show your work.
Yes.
Because if you show your work, your answer is going to be a lot more believable. And people can see, okay, well, he was wrong, but this is where he got it. You know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
this people can say, well, he said there was a chance it might not rain, and this is why. So instead of going back to the weatherman and going, what gives? I don't understand. I gave you, hey, this thing over here could possibly happen. There was a Friday night where I was watching two disturbances come in from the west. One was coming in from the northwest, one was coming in from the southwest, and they were kind of colliding. And depending on which one dominated, which one got ahead, it was going to completely change our weather forecast for the next day. And we had multiple outdoor events. We had Miracle League outdoors. We had an SPCA event that was outdoors. It was the fun run or the fun, whatever they call their run, their fundraiser that they have in town sometimes. And I was the MC at that, so I really had to be paying attention. So I had Miracle League ask me what was going to happen. I had those folks asking me, and it was completely dependent on which one of these disturbances took over. And there was really no way in that moment to know which one was going to get ahead. And I'm watching loop after loop. I'm watching frame by frame. It's just there's just no clear indication either way. And I remember looking at the National Weather Service and what they were, they were in the same spot. They could not tell which of those was going to take over. And people were asking me what's going to happen the next day. And I had to tell them, look, this is the situation. This is what I'm seeing. This is why I'm not sure. Just based on what I'm seeing now, I would err on the side of caution and assume that there's going to be rain and storms all over the place the next day, widespread rain, right?
Uh-huh.
Because it was kind of an all or nothing deal. The next morning, there's not much happening. And it turned out that one of those disturbances took over, stabilized the air so that the second one had nothing to work with by the time it got here. So it just kind of fell apart. And so there were folks that changed weekend plans because of my forecast, thinking it was going to rain all day, and it was relatively dry.
And that's the weather.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And I would even, if I was even in your shoes, I would say, hey, it probably is going to rain, because if you tell everyone it's not going to rain and it just floods, well, now you're really the bad guy.
Right. And I would rather be the guy that told you, hey, here's why I'm thinking either way, than say, here's what I think, and then afterwards have to explain myself later. Right. So that's kind of why I try to give. And I've had people tell me before, man, your posts are way too long or they're way too detailed. That's why I'm doing that, because I want you to be able to see, here's the reason behind the forecast. Here's the reasoning why I'm not certain about it. I'd rather show you, here's the different possibilities other than just give you, hey, here's a quick snapshot of what I think is going to happen. Good luck. We'll see.
Oh, I love it. I love someone explaining something to me, because I get to learn it. It's like, hey, this is okay. The services cause this, or if you start talking about like cumulus clouds, or you start talking about other stuff, you're like, oh, hey, I learned this. Hey, okay, we can, okay, I understand what I'm looking at here all of a sudden. Or he's like, hey, if you look into the northwest, you can see the cold front coming in. And you're like, hey, that's it right there. It's really dark. It's coming this way.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I absolutely, I'd rather be more on the lengthy side. Now, if it's like 5 pages long, I can tell you I'm going to be like,
Yeah. Cliff's notes. Yeah. You need something more simple.
yeah, I mean, but no, but like if you just explain it, absolutely. But I can't. I have probably the worst ADHD to the max, and I have, yeah, if it's way long, my wife, she'll read it all and she'll hold it to her heart and be like, this is it. And
Yeah.
you got me for about probably a good solid 4 or 5 minutes, and I'm done scattered on to something else,
Sure.
But getting into meteorology, what kind of schooling, like I told you, I went to, well, I didn't go to OU, but, I was around all this stuff, but I never really dove into it. It's like, what is required for somebody to jump into your shoes, because obviously you have to go to school. And
So, I'll tell you, I myself do not have a meteorology degree.
oh, okay.
I learned by grabbing every weather book I could find, studying from, the guys up at Dallas that did it for so long, just observing on my own, just kind of studying things as they happen, trying to understand why and how and all those kind of things. I don't have a formal education in it.
Okay.
I imagine I could probably do fairly well in those classes should I take those. Um, but obviously, yeah, if you're young and you're wanting to start out and go the traditional route, definitely get a meteorology degree. Obviously, you mentioned the University of Oklahoma, kind of best known for that. I understand that Texas A&M has a pretty good meteorology program as well, and there were a few others as well. Uh, but you definitely want to look at a meteorology degree. And what scared me out of doing it was the amount of math involved, math
Oh,
and
yeah.
physics and those kinds of things. And realistically, there are not many meteorologists who are doing the hardcore, taking out a piece of paper and doing all these equations to figure out the day's forecast. The models do most of that for us. But as I've understood by talking to other people in the business now, it's more of trying to understand those concepts. The math teaches you how the factors all come together. So it's kind of a bigger picture understanding, but it's still there. So I didn't get a meteorology degree myself. Um, I kind of wish I had, because not only for the sake of my own imposter syndrome, but just the fact that it does lend you a little more legitimacy.
Uh-huh.
I try my best not to be kind of lumped in with all the other social media weather guys, because I feel like that the majority of them, and it may not be fair to say the majority, but a good number of them are kind of playing the hype game. And I mean, you've probably seen me talk about that on the page many times
Yes. Yeah.
about how they're posting the biggest, brightest, colorful map they can find, throwing a bunch of scary words on it and throwing it out there for you to consume, and hoping that it gets more shares and clicks. I'm sure it probably does. They're probably making more money than I am. And some of those guys have full formal education, some don't. There's just kind of a mixture out there, and but if you want to work for the National Weather Service, for example, or possibly an airline, or go into the military, there are many, many, many different ways to find a career in meteorology. Having a meteorology degree, let me clarify that. Um, you definitely have a much broader horizon in front of you. The way I did it was, self-made. I had to learn how to open a business and do all of these kind of things. It was not the easiest track. And, there's still times where I see something going on and I'm texting, elders or, mentors that I have going, what am I missing here? What's happening here? And they'll be able to tell me. Of course, they've also been doing it for a long time, much longer than I
Yeah,
have.
sure.
But I mentioned my imposter syndrome. I've been told by several people higher up in the business that they admire my work, or that they approve of my work, I guess is a better way to say it. And having over 50,000 people on Facebook, following this brand, and season after season, folks are jumping in. I must be doing something correctly, because I would imagine if I was too far off base, I wouldn't go very far. So, there are times where I kind of look at myself and go, am I really doing this? Is this really working out as well as I think it is? But all the signs are there that it is. And so, all the years of study that I've put into it, all the years of just trying to kind of connect the dots and put the understanding in place, uh, clearly I'm doing something right.
Oh, no, yeah, I would not, that your imposter syndrome, that is yeah, I wouldn't put that to you at all. Yeah, no, man, like I said a couple times already, I tip my hat to you, sir. Like, it is what you've been able to accomplish is, and plus, it's your childhood dream. You were drawing tornadoes at 6 years old, so yeah, absolutely. Just this is you. So even correct education or not, I mean, heck, I went to UNT and I got a degree to be a history teacher.
Mhm.
Then I realized that I don't like kids.
That 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 did get in the way. Yeah, I can see that.
Uh, so my wife has a question for you.
Sure.
She's a huge fan of puns.
Okay.
Like we'll watch Bob's Burgers, and her best part of watching Bob's Burgers is like the puns on like the intro or whatnot, burger of the day or whatnot. And she was wondering, like, do you ever incorporate any puns into your forecast or into your shows?
Yeah, I mean, I have before.
Okay.
I will tell you that a lot of the time I try to have fun with the headlines on the website. So southmetroweather.com, if you go there, um, or if you subscribe on our Patreon, you get to see the forecast with the little headline at the top. Generally on Facebook, you're just going to see just kind of the lead and then go from there, right? But just the way the formatting works on the website, you're able to see that headline. And sometimes in the headline, I'll try to throw something clever in there, or sometimes in the lead, that sort of thing. But there's guys that have done, they'll sneak some 50 Cent lyrics in their forecast, but I don't think I've ever been that bold. I might have on a time or two, but I don't think that I'm cool enough to pull something like that off and do it smooth. But
Oh, I could see you do it.
we've done a few kind of more fun things. In fact, there was a situation, I believe it was last year, where my voice was gone.
Okay.
And it was, in fact, trying to remember if it was. I feel like it was every. I feel like it's every November I get the same cold, and it's this cold that hits me, and I need to check that actually because that it's October, November, somewhere in there, I think.
It's a cold, definitely not COVID.
Well, no, it's one of these things where it's almost a seasonal thing because it happens the same time every year, and for some reason, it's this cold that turns into a sore throat and takes out my voice.
Okay.
And it acts the same way every time. It's a strange one of these days I want a doctor uh to explain this to me because I don't know what it is. So yeah, so this was November 10th of 23 when she did it. In November, if I'm gone for a few days, that's probably why. But I really I hadn't done a video in a few days. This cold was going on longer than it usually does. Had no voice. And my wife said, it'd be funny if I did the weather for you. I'll be right back. And I went and she kind of went, I was joking. And I said, yeah, you had a good idea. Let's go.
There you go.
So she kind of just rolled her eyes and said, all right, you know what? I'll humor you. Let's go do it. It was really funny. There was a moment in there where it was showing a water vapor imagery, and the satellite water vapor imagery does a really good job sometimes of showing the different features in the atmosphere, the low pressure and where the moisture is going, that kind of thing. So it's a tool that I use often just because visually it's easy to explain.
Sure.
And it came up, and she said, "Okay, so here's some rain," and I said, "No, it's not rain." She goes, "But it says water vapor. Water makes rain." I said, "No, but it's not falling." She goes, "Okay, moving on." And so just, she was, and I think that she got more views than I did, for a while there. So we've tried to do, some fun things. I mean, there's times where I've actually fed my baby on the air a time or two.
That Richard, the owner here, he was talking about that.
The baby was, my wife was still working for a little while. She's staying at home with the kids now, but she was still working for a little while, and we had this kind of overlap where I was covering severe storms and I was doing the math in my head, and I knew he'd be waking up soon. And as soon as he woke up, he's going to be hungry. So right off camera, I had the bottle with the distilled water and the formula and everything all pre-portioned, ready to go. And about 10 minutes after a severe thunderstorm warning was issued, I started hearing him crying.
Okay.
And I go, all right, let's see how this goes. So I brought him in, and he was having a bit of a spit up issue. He'd eaten, burp really big and spit up and that kind of thing. So brought him in, started feeding him. And of course, he didn't care. He's getting food. He doesn't care where or in what manner. He's just, he's good. So feeding him and started burping him. Of course, he spits up. I think he spit up twice. Sorry if anybody's eating while they're listening to this. But there's been that situation. Of course, people have talked about the weather cat on many occasions, seeing the cat involved. And my son Charlie earlier this week, being one of the forecast videos. So we try to keep things light. We try to have more fun. I've done a skit or two, those kinds of things. Um, I've been told all my life I'm too serious. So I try to, bring some fun into it every now and then.
He's up every day. Yeah.
And I think one of the funniest things was how excited people got when I drank a beer on the air. And it had already been a long day, and I already opened a shiner, and storms came up, and turned out one of them decided to be an overachiever that day and get some attention. So prompted a severe thunderstorm warning. I jumped on the air, and I wasn't just gonna let my beer get warm,
Absolutely not. Yeah.
and the last one I had, so I wanted to finish it. And people got so excited that I was drinking the beer, and I'm going, "This is all it takes to get you folks excited?" I've been working too hard.
Let me go ahead. I'll put my whiskey glass out there next time, right?
Well, yeah, there's been times where I've had to jump on the air mid nightcap and, go from there. But, yeah, no, it's always interesting. There was the time that uh, there was, hail going on, and after the hail had passed, I had my wife go and grab some hailstones, and I threw it in my Dr. Pepper and drank that, that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
so we try to have a little fun when we can. We try not to be too much doom and gloom in all business on
absolutely.
those live streams.
I will say I could see where it'd be kind of hard for you to kind of turn off work mode because, like, even when I come here, it's after my job, and it's like it's almost sometimes 10 minutes before I get here, I'm still in work mode, and I'm a completely different person. I got, hey, we did this, and we're going forward, and I know I was at home, and wife's like, yeah, you gotta turn work mode off. No one's gonna want to be around you. It's like, oh, okay, noted. Thank you, honey.
Yeah, you mentioned in an email to me that I'm a celebrity, and people call me a celebrity, and all I have to say to that is I wish my car and my bank account looked a little more celebrity-like, because they would find that quite hilarious. But, there will be people that come up to me in the grocery store and in the restaurants and those kind of things and say hello, and, my wife always makes fun of me because she says I can flip a switch. And, I go from being husband and dad in the grocery store telling some dad joke or some story or something to, I throw on the on-air voice and, kind of do the weatherman thing and then go back to whatever story I was telling my wife and kids, that kind of thing. She enjoys watching that. And my kids, my wife and my son, my oldest son, have actually made it a game now of counting how many people recognize me at an event or at the store or something.
Oh,
Uh,
you got 50,000 people that follow you, and just in this area. So yeah, people are gonna see you. My wife, she picked you out quickest. Because I was in here, and yeah, she picked you out.
I mean, I guess I'm used to it now.
Uh-huh.
I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy hearing about how the brand has impacted them and, hearing those stories. But, my wife and kids, they still get a kick out of it.
Oh, I could see it make it a fun game. Yeah. So just kind of going towards, like, a little bit of just some of the weather, but, like, do you have like a dream weather event that you want to cover?
It's hard to say because I feel like I've covered a little bit of everything. We've had everything from weather events that I could see them coming for days to events where, they're literally caught just completely off guard. There was, a few months ago, earlier in the summer, we had a fairly widespread rain event, and that's really all it was. It was a rain event. There was some lightning and thunder here and there, but it was a pretty casual rain. And here I am putting a TV mount together for my kid's room, doing dad things,
Yeah.
and my phone is covered up by instructions or something. And when I uncover it, I see that there was a tornado warning issued for Hill County 10 minutes ago.
Oh, you're late to the game.
So I'm in, shorts and a t-shirt. I jump over this stuff, fly into my office, nearly bite the dirt trying to get in my chair. And I didn't even have time to set up the green screen. So I just kind of went on my desk, kind of the other setup I have, and said, I don't know where it came from, folks, but we have a tornado warning. And you went through the thing, text a friend of mine because he's in Golson and the storm was fairly close to there. So I'm trying to let him know and do all these things. Of course, by the time I got to my desk, it was just about over. But there's been times where, it just kind of comes out of nowhere and I got to be ready to rock and roll at any point. There's been times where I've had to, I'll be up at Costco with my wife up in Dallas County, and all of a sudden I need to get paid up, throw everything in the truck, and fly down 35 to get ahead of this storm that just popped up out of nowhere. So it keeps you on your toes for sure.
Oh,
So it's hard to imagine a dream event. I mean, I've covered tornadoes, I've covered microbursts, I've covered uh, hurricane remnants that have come in. I've covered the February 2021 storm. So it just in the nearly 10 years that I've been doing this, I feel like I've pretty well covered the gambit.
I could see maybe like a dream one would be like on the movie Twister. How we were talking about Twister earlier, where all of a sudden, you get the EF5 tornado that the legendary one, or something like that. You don't want to
Yeah,
report the damage.
see, that's the difference is, you have storm chasers and you'll see the difference in their bias on social media as well, when they're reporting information. You have these storm chasers that they're going to be very optimistic towards severe weather because they want that severe weather to happen so they can have a good chase. On the opposite side of things, I try to be a little more balanced and a little more realistic because I'd rather not cover a tornado. Uh, I know this area very well. This is home for me. I'm a seventh generation resident of Ellis County.
Oh, wow.
And so to see a tornado here, all I think about is the people that are in the path of it. There was the storm in, was it 2020, maybe 2021, where it said the tornado south of Waxahachie, across 35, down
Oh,
from the, I believe it was down towards the Boz Great House area that way,
yes.
and across 35 just north of Foreston. And all I could think about was all of the manufactured homes in that area.
Oh, yeah.
And the very, very, very vulnerable communities in that area that were going to be very vulnerable to those situations. So it was hard for me to separate um, those circumstances and to just be straight weather guy and just keep it as it was. And so it's hard for me to hope for something like that, just because the human cost is always present in my mind because I'm so familiar with this area. If it was an area that maybe I'm not as familiar with, and I mean, you got these nationwide YouTubers that probably don't know how to pronounce Waxahachie.
Right.
Probably had no idea there's an Auburn in Ellis County, a little community called Auburn. Don't know that it's Italy instead of Italy. Don't know all of these things about this area, and I'm sure they're able to be a little more cavalier about it. But for me, I'm very familiar with this area, so for me, it's much more personal.
Oh, no, I could definitely see that. I mean, as I said about the big tornadoes, like, it'd be cool to, like, or maybe see, like, a big storm, like, that didn't develop or something. Like, man, that was neat. That could have been really bad. Thank God it wasn't, yeah, because
Like,
I would hate, this, it's such a, I mean, we grew up in South Dallas and, we moved here 13 years ago. And so this is our home now. And so we've kind of learned out everything as well. But yeah, no, I'd hate to see anything get destroyed by any storm or anything. They're fun to watch.
yeah, the best tornadoes we have are the ones that are out in the middle of Wyoming somewhere that don't hit anything. Those are the best. Those are the ones. If I get a report later that there was this huge tornado that went out of its way to not do anything expensive and just rearrange some trees, then I'll celebrate that all day long.
Right.
But it's when you get closer to those populations, your fascination starts to become a little more real. And I rag on sound like I'm ragging on storm chasers, but I'll tell you, when it comes to the storm chasers that know how to handle themselves professionally, Reed Timmer.
Okay.
Reed Timmer is insane, by the way. In case you couldn't already tell, if you've ever watched him, it becomes pretty. I mean, the man's nuts. But here's the thing: there was a one of the shows. There've been 3 or 4 shows that have covered him. Um, there was an event where they were following a tornado and they followed where the damage path was, uh, and came upon a neighborhood that was hit and realized they were the first ones there.
Oh,
They
wow.
immediately got out of the truck and started knocking on doors. They understood that their first aid, they're first on scene.
Uh,
That chase is over. Your priority changes in a moment's notice. You're no longer focused on getting video and pictures and that kind of thing. You're focused on helping with response. And so part of having all of this understanding, all this knowledge of being acutely aware of how destructive these storms can be, which is, again, kind of the burden on my side of I recognize how catastrophic the storm could be. I don't want to scare the viewers, but in the back of my mind, I'm going, I got to figure out a way to make this clear. But that's the thing. You can tell the people that take this whole weather thing seriously when they put the people first. And it really, really encouraged me to see Reed and since to see other situations where storm chasers that they seem like they're out there for the views and for the viral video and for all of their self-interest. But then when they find people in need, they immediately switch gears. They shove all of that to the side and they try to go in and help. It's the same way with myself. Behind the storm, I start getting in touch with first responders, with emergency management. What can I do? Because once the storm is over, I'm irrelevant.
Sure.
It's now the job of the first responders, of emergency management, and these people that go in and start trying to help on the backside. And that's when I offer my services to them and say, hey, is there any kind of messaging I can do for you? Do you need another? If you need a warm body, I'll suit up and get out there. Whatever the case is, because you have to understand that when you know this much, if you're not using it to serve people, I mean, what are you doing?
No, absolutely. Yeah, that's just also just being a good-hearted human being,
Sure.
Yeah. So, also the wild events, earlier this year, we had what was it called? A cloud burst or microburst?
So it was a microburst. Yeah.
Okay. Can you kind of explain what that? Because I still don't, all thing I know is I got really high winds and a lot of hail that tore up a lot of stuff all around our area.
So there are, I think there's now political parties on Facebook about whether that was a microburst or a tornado. I think people are still arguing about that. And it was kind of wild to see that, to see how entrenched people were. Not that we haven't been trained by that just with our current, circumstances,
Sure.
but people just really wanted to argue. And I think part of the reason for that was that a lot of people thought they would get a better claim if it was a tornado as opposed to something else. I don't think it really works that way, and you can ask your insurance guy. I don't think that's really how that goes. But what happened was we had storms coming in from the southwest, and it produced what is called a microburst. And a microburst is a random, forceful burst of winds downward out of the storm. So any storm has an updraft and a downdraft. The updraft is where it's soaking in all of the moisture.
Like it's
Mhm.
feeding, right?
Right.
Uh,
And that's why I call moist. I know people hate that word, but air filled with moisture that's unstable is storm food. That's what feeds this stuff, right? We get all of that rich Gulf moisture in, and it feeds on all of it, and then it goes up in the cloud. Well, what goes up must come down. Eventually, we all know that it eventually comes down as rain. That's that's your downdraft. And there can be times where you have a violent, sudden burst of air. And when it comes down out of the cloud, it's like pouring water on pavement. When it hits the pavement, it can't go any farther down. So it's going to go out, goes out in all directions. And what we had was winds that peaked right around 90 miles an hour or so. And yes, those are tornado force winds. I mean, you can have those are equivalent to the speed of a tornado, but the difference is these winds are all straight line. They're all in
Okay.
one direction, straight line winds, as opposed to rotating winds of a tornado. Now, people have told me, well, my trash can's over there and my, you know, tools are over there. What happened? Well, you can have, if it's in a neighborhood, it can create a little wind tunnel, which can kind of do its own thing. It doesn't mean that the winds can't rotate as they're going in spots. There were homes over right in the Garden Valley area of Waxahachie. There was two houses in particular that were hit very, very hard. And what was interesting was that the one side of the house faced south, but the garage was on the north side, and the garage door was pushed inward.
Oh, wow. Uh-huh.
So winds coming in from the southwest, but the garage door is pushed inward. How does that make sense? Well, what can happen is these winds, and I know people listening can't see this, what I'm showing you, but they go on either side and then curl in. And the
Okay,
reason
it's
for
like
that,
if they hit something, they just wrap around.
basically,
Like if you're
yeah,
pouring water.
right. Well, exactly, because when it goes past the house, all of a sudden that when that obstacle ends, there's a void there. There's a lack of that wind. So it's like water, like you say, it's going to fill that space at 90 miles an hour or less at that point because it's degraded sun is just going through, but it's going to curl around and it's going to come the opposite direction. So the fact that we've seen little areas where there might have been some brief rotation of it doesn't change the fact that it was a straight line winds because it wasn't a concentrated funnel of air rotating all the way to the base of the cloud.
Okay.
So
It was just ground air that was funneling, I guess.
it was obstacles on the ground that were causing small rotations. And one of the things that I noticed when I went out a couple of days later and surveyed the damage was that there were almost little hot spots. There were areas where you could see where the winds were very strong, and then you could see areas between those hot spots where it wasn't as intense. So it was almost like there were multiple microbursts going on. And the reason you have, especially you go over on Marvin Street, right? I have a cousin that lives out in that area, and you look at those houses, including hers, and it looks like a massive shotgun unloaded on these houses. And that's why I used the term buckshot hail when I was covering this storm. And it's because this hail, which wasn't in that situation, it wasn't necessarily massive hail.
Yeah.
The problem was it was hail that was flying at 90 miles an hour.
No, yeah, because I still live off of Marvin as well, so when you're just
Right.
driving a buckshot, you see the side of these houses,
Yeah.
and it looks like
Yeah. So you have this buckshot hail that's flying at 90 miles an hour and is going through windows and these kinds of things. The siding of houses are not designed to take hail. Your roof, sure, but it's not the side of your house is not designed to take that kind of impact. And so that's what caused that to happen. It was just one of these situations where those winds caught the hail core just right. And part of the problem in the studio that I was having, and I didn't find this out until the National Weather Service did kind of an analysis on all this later and did a very good video explaining all of it. Um, the density of the hail, and this was early. This was early spring, March 8th. Okay,
yeah.
so we were still relatively cool at that point. And if we're relatively cool here, you can imagine the updraft that's carrying all this rain up in the cloud to be frozen as hail. That increased the hail density. So there's tons of hail. So you not only have hail, period, there's tons of it. You have 90-mile-an-hour winds that's pushing a high volume of hail, 90 miles. I mean, it was just, I hate to use the cliche perfect storm, but it was some circumstances that came together and really made it a fairly unique situation. And the trouble on my end in the studio was that the density of all of that hail made it hard for the radar beam to see the wind speeds we were dealing with. I could tell there was increasing winds and we could point that out on the radar, but we didn't see the severity of it. A lot of people ask, why didn't the sirens sound? Because sirens, and I have to briefly disclaim, those outdoor warning sirens are only designed to be heard outdoors.
Yeah.
So people complain that they can't hear them in their house. They're not for you. Sign up for Weather Call or get, do something that will allow you to get those warnings indoors on your phone, on your television, on your radio, whatever the case is, right? The sirens are for people outdoors. But people wonder, why weren't they sounded? Because those sirens are often sounded for winds above 70 miles per hour per the North Texas Council of Governments, guidelines. The problem is that these microbursts happen so randomly and so quickly. Those sirens, for the most part, are human activated. And
Okay.
so by the time someone would have had word to sound the siren, it's over with, right? It's done. So that was not a situation where we could have had that kind of response. And I didn't even know the extent of it until I started getting pictures and video later that morning.
It was
And
wild.
of course, there was unfortunately a gentleman at the Texas Motorplex that lost his life.
Yes. Yeah,
And,
that was real sad deal.
in fact, I met his dad a few months back. That will forever and always be not so much now that we've had time to really kind of pull it apart and do some forensics and figure out what was going on the reporting side. But that was one of those storms that for a long time I had a pit in my stomach going, how did I miss that? It was one of those things that I lost sleep trying to figure out, how did I not catch that? Like I say, the National Weather Service, they did some analysis to kind of help figure out why were we not seeing the extent of what was going on, and that helped me some. Um, but that will always be one of those events where I look at that and go, I really wish I'd have had a better eye on it. I really wish I would have somehow. It's unrealistic, right?
Sure.
But wish I would have had some kind of clairvoyance or something that would have allowed me to get a better read on what was happening there, to give more warning. But unfortunately, it's one of those situations where things just get really wild really fast. And that's why you have to even take severe thunderstorm warnings seriously. Because people think, well, if it's not a tornado, then I don't have to worry about it. But straight line winds can do a lot of damage, and they can really, really change things for the worse. And so you have to take those things very, very seriously.
Oh, I agree, and I will say, like, how you were talking about not losing sleep under that storm. There was no warnings. There was nothing that told us that, hey, there's going to be a storm tonight or anything, because we check it all the time.
Well, I mean, it was in the forecast.
Well, like,
Uh,
but it was
but
like, hey, there's not going to be like, hey, we have a 80% chance of heavy thunderstorms tonight, or
it was, yeah, the forecast was uncertain the night before. And it was kind of one of these things, if I remember correctly, it was a disturbance where we were kind of waiting to see whether it was going to make it here. How far is it going to make it? That sort of thing. And I remember waking up the next morning, seeing it and going, okay, well, we'll see if it makes it this far or not. Turns out it did. And turns out those things, slammed the gas when they got to our area.
yes, yes, it did.
And if I remember correctly, by the time they got up in Dallas County into the Metroplex, they fell apart. But we just happened to catch them when they were really ticked off, and
Yes,
they just kind of did their thing. But that's just it. That's why you have to look at every chance of storms, whether it could just be one or two, or whether it could be all hell breaking loose. I'm in that studio. I'm keeping an eye on it because I've had enough experience with these things getting out of hand very quickly. And sometimes it's like watching grass grow. Sometimes I'm just babysitting these storms and nothing happens.
sure.
But you always have to be prepared for when things are going to break loose.
Yeah. Oh no, I can tell you just based off that storm in general that we're talking about. I remember walking out and there was so much hail all over my yard.
Yeah.
It looked like, and it was deep. I bet you some spots it was probably at least 4 to 6 inches deep of hail.
Right.
I had drifts of hail in my front door that was at least 2 feet deep.
Yeah.
And of course it destroyed everything.
Yeah.
But I was going out there, I was going, whoa, this was
Yeah.
not expect. Like I couldn't, like, the ditch in my front yard to the street going across. It just looked like just one blanket. They couldn't even tell, like, where the street even was anymore. There was just so much hail just blowing everywhere. It was,
Sure.
I've never seen nothing like that in my life. I don't want to see anything like that again, but
Well, and normally in the early spring, we kind of get a few weeks to kind of warm into severe weather season. And I remember it was March 2nd that we had storms. And in fact, we had a tornado warning early in the morning. It wasn't in Ellis County, but I believe it was over in Johnson County. And it was 1:30 in the morning when a tornado warning was issued. And I remember thinking to myself, it is day 2 of meteorological spring, because the meteorological seasons follow, the three, for example, we just started meteorological fall. So that's September, October, November,
guess we've ever seen that.
winter, so on and so forth. And March 2nd, it's the second day of meteorological spring, and I've already got a tornado warning at 1:30 a.m. Clearly, I don't get to ease into this at all. It was just, and I mean, spring seemingly went through half of June, and really even half of July. It just, we had a lot of rain, we had a lot of storms that just kind of kept going, and by the time I felt like I got into my usual kind of summer autopilot, and it's just going to be hot all the time, it was almost time for school to start.
Yes.
So summer, it's been nice, but for me, it was a very busy spring that turned into a abnormally busy summer. And I had my little bit of rest, but we're getting into fall, which is our second severe weather season. So I'm starting to kind of stretch out and get ready to rock and roll.
Okay. So talking about your office, and I'm sure you have a studio type setup. One thing that always kind of intrigued me is that whenever you're showing us the radar, behind you is a green screen, correct?
Yeah.
It doesn't have what you're looking at. It's just a green screen.
Correct.
How do you have like a big screen in front of you that you have to look and be like, okay, I'm pointing at this,
Yeah,
or
so the way you set that up is that I have monitors on either side, and I'm using a small bedroom in my house.
okay,
So the green screen literally I mean, you remember in grade school, the maps would pull down or the projector screen, pull down from this. I have a green screen that does the same thing
Okay.
because my studio has to be in a working office at the same time. So, it has to be a comfortable space because I'm spending a lot of time there. Or that's why there's also a PlayStation 5 in there. But, so I spend a lot of time in there. So I've got, my desk on one side, and that has one of the monitors I watch. And then on the other side is another monitor, and I've got that connected by a long cable across the room. So yeah, when I'm looking at the green screen, I'm pointing behind me, but you'll see I'm looking to the side and I'm looking at that monitor and I can see the chat session as well. And the camera, of course, is over here, and there's 3 monitors here, so I can have a couple of other things if I need to as well. I've usually got my phone going. I've usually got a laptop kind of in front of me over to the side, as well if I need something else. I mean, there are times I can have 5 or 6 screens all going at once, with all different sources of information and different things that I have to be keeping an eye on.
As well as trying to point in the correct spot behind you that's just a blank green screen.
Right. You get enough practice, it kind of, you get used to it. When I started doing the green screen thing, um, I think I acclimated to it quicker than I thought I would. And originally, I I had been having trouble getting a monitor on the right side because in Texas, you'll notice that weathermen usually stand when you're watching it on the right side. And that's because when there's a map on the screen, they're on the east side of the screen. Storms are coming in from the west, usually. So I was standing on the side of it where the storms are not likely to be necessarily. So that's where you're less likely to be in the way of what you're trying to show. So, but I didn't have a monitor over there and I was having some issues getting that set up correctly. So I was on the other side, I was on the left side, but I mirrored the image
Oh, man.
because I needed to be on the correct side, but I wasn't able to stand on that side on the green screen in the office, in the studio. So that was a little bit, that gave me a few headaches.
I could see that make throw you for a loop.
And then once I was able to kind of update that and get that other monitor going and everything, and I was actually able to stand on the right side, that made it a little easier. I kind of had to unwind what I'd learned at that point. But it took some practice. It took some a little bit of a learning curve. But like I say, I've been pointing at fake maps of weather stuff since I was a kid. And prior to that, I was pointing at I had a television, a big screen TV in that studio. So for a short time, I was pointing at that. And I was trying to talk to the camera. I didn't want to be doing this too much, looking behind me.
Uh-huh.
So I'd kind of do a thing where I could kind of get a glance and then, okay, I can kind of remember how far away the storm is where I bend my arm, that sort of thing. I always want to be looking at the camera. I always want to be looking at the viewer, right? And
Yeah.
making sure they feel I'm talking to you. I'm not staring at a TV screen. I'm talking to you. So by the time I got to the green screen, in some ways that actually kind of made it easier because I'm able to look here, which the illusion sort of is that you look like you're looking at the map, right? But you're looking at a screen over here. So it takes some getting used to, and it was definitely challenging to make all of that happen in a very small space. But I just have to keep that room very clean. So I've got room to operate, and you just figure out how to make it work.
Man, that's awesome. Heck, able to do that. Compared to how you're saying out of a bedroom is South Metro weather. I was like, heck, for some reason, I had it in my head that you had this huge, elaborate studio in the back that walked out to and had your big old satellite dish up there. And no,
We've done some house shopping, and I'll tell you the housing market scares me to death right now. So I'm happy to be where I'm at. But every time we look at a house, I think, where's that big extra space for the studio guy? There's been a couple of times where there will be a detached, uh, kind of a separate house kind of thing, or like a second floor or something with a big like media room kind of thing.
yeah,
And all of those places, it's tempting because I would love to have a much larger space with a bigger green screen, be able to do more things. Um, but at the same time, though, like you said, I'm kind of a one man band, so that smaller space kind of makes it easier for me to um, have everything within reach.
Oh, yeah.
It feels like I've got more control. The bigger the space, the less I'm gonna feel like I have everything under control, so to speak. So, I don't know, it's enticing, but it's also a little bit intimidating, to expand beyond what I've got right now.
I could see that. I could see it. I just had it in my head that, you go back there and you got a big old huge shop, South Metro weather, go through the nice glass doors and you go and you have your studio with all your cameras. For some reason I had that built up in my head. You do a great job out of just the one bedroom.
I appreciate that.
Kudos to you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes. So this kind of, it's kind of wrapping it up. The one last question I have regarding the weather is how far out are you able to predict?
That's always a fun question to answer. So
Like my dad reads the Farmer's Almanac,
yeah.
and he's like, Michael, this is when I'm going to start planting my crops, because he has a garden that he does every year. He's like, yep, it says by April, we're good. There's not going to be another freeze. And by cracky, that's what he does, and
So over the years, we've seen, the guys on TV go from a 3-day forecast to a 5-day forecast. Then they started adding a bonus, 6 and 7. Then they went to a 10. And now I think Channel 8's at a 14-day forecast.
wow.
If you go to AccuWeather, I think it's the AccuWeather app that has they go out like a month or something crazy. It's really wild. And what I tell people is 2 days is a pretty good bet. 5 days, you're starting to kind of see more detail. 7 days is broad strokes. I won't go beyond 7 days. I think that we've gotten to a point where 7 days is far enough out that I can give you plenty of notice of, hey, we're starting to see something maybe come together. But anytime I do, anytime I talk about days 6 and 7, I'll tell you, hey, this is a broad stroke. This is a generalized idea, big picture. We'll hone in as we get closer, that kind of thing. So context is always key when you're talking about how far out you're looking. Now, there are people I kind of was poking at some of these guys on social media that were already putting out their winter weather forecast.
Okay.
And what's funny is usually there's a sales pitch on the end of that. So, they have their reasons for doing certain things. Um, there are guys like, the Farmer's Almanac and the Climate Prediction Center that try to go out several months. Um, but part of that is that, people on social media, they wanna have the biggest forecast. They wanna have the farthest out forecast, so they wanna be the one that you pay attention to, and they count on by the time you get there that you've probably forgotten what they said 3 months ago.
That's right.
So, they're kind of playing fast and loose, but, uh, anytime I look at these generalized things, really the only long-term forecasting that I'll look at or talk about, is when we talk about, for example, like El Nino or La Nina. Okay.
Yeah.
Those have been in the past, they've been pretty good indicators of the big picture. Now, that comes with a really, really, really big disclaimer. And I've given lectures about the difference between perception and reality in terms of how we remember weather events and these kind of things. Because February 2021, how would you or that winter from 2020 to 2021, how would you characterize that winter?
Oh gosh. I remember it being cold,
Mhm.
and there was also we had a snowstorm. But yeah, it was probably one of the colder ones that I can think of for sure.
Would it blow your mind if I told you that was one of the more mild winters we've had on record?
Yes.
Because we were in the 70s before and after that winter storm hit. And but
Oh, what
with
say?
you remember that event. But the difference is, it's the difference between the best, and I've spent so much time in the medical field that this is just where my head goes, but it's the difference between a chronic illness and an acute illness. A chronic illness is big picture, long term. An acute illness is it happens and it comes and goes. So it was a La Nina season in February of 2021. And normally a La Nina season for us, the generalized trend, if you will, is a warmer, drier season. However, that kind of setup also allows for more fluctuations in what we call the polar vortex. Now, the polar vortex, contrary to what a lot of reporters and TV people like to use, because they love that term. It's a big scary term. It's an exciting term that gets a lot of ratings, right? So they just love to throw this thing around.
Yeah,
But
you
the,
know,
but the
the polar vortex is throwing some cold air our way, or
so the polar vortex is an omnipresent, basically like a jet stream up around the Arctic Circle,
okay,
around the North Pole, that kind of thing,
sure,
far north.
yes,
It's always there. But people like to call a polar vortex a strong storm system that comes through. Those are not the same thing. Now, the way that the polar vortex can impact our weather is when you have fluctuations or distortions. Because normally it's just, going around the Arctic Circle and it just stays up there. It kind of holds all that, the coldest, most intense Arctic air right there within the polar vortex.
okay,
Now, distortions allow that cold air to go farther south because it can dip down. The jet stream can dip down and pull that polar vortex farther south so that the cold air that it's holding up there is able to go farther down. So the La Nina pattern, warmer, drier generally here, but the exception is it can sometimes allow for more distortions in that polar vortex. So what happened? We had an exceptionally strong system that came through and it pulled that polar vortex down into Texas and allowed that very cold Arctic air to come in.
okay,
That wasn't part of the overall seasonal setup. That was an acute situation that happened with a storm system that came in. So even though it was one of the more mild, uh, more dry seasons, we happen to have a very strong winter storm and just the right setup to pull record-breaking cold air into our area for that period of time. So there's people have already. I think there was a newspaper in San Antonio that's already said, "La Nina winter's coming. Are we getting another ice mageddon or major freeze? That kind of thing." Because they're saying, okay, well, it happened once, then we can use that headline to scare people and get more hits,
the day,
get more likes and shares, that kind of thing. But you have to separate when you're looking at these long-term forecasts, when you're looking at, when they say, well, it's going to be warmer and drier. And what's funny is you have a lot of people that, well, I think the winter is going to be warm and dry. They're not telling you that they're just looking at the El Nino or the La Nina forecast and going off of that. They're going to say, well, I have determined. No, you're going off of
you're looking at a module and you're going, yep, that's it.
you're looking at what the Climate Prediction Center has already said about the La Nina pattern
No,
and just assuming that you just came up with this yesterday. So, but because this thing happened over here doesn't necessarily mean that what happened last time is going to happen this time. By the same token, though, even just because it's a warm, dry pattern overall, doesn't mean we can't get a snowstorm or two. It's a difference in scale. Those snowstorms that come in are going to be more likely to just be a strong front that we just happen to get. On the bigger scale, overall, it might be warmer and drier, but you have to understand how to compare those two things. And the weather guys on TV are not always good at giving that context. And
okay,
the guys on social media usually don't want to because that kind of kills the buzz of their big exciting,
yeah, they're not,
forecast.
if you're getting, your clicks or whatever, it's you're not getting it now.
Right.
You're not getting it. So
And I
you
say
gotta have
that
the pop, you gotta have the wow, the scare factor.
I say that fully aware of the fact that I'm one of those social media guys, but, if you followed my brand for any amount of time, you know that I try to be a little different than what you usually see out there. I try to be a little more of a straight shooter, a little more simple. Sometimes it's not as exciting because it is what it is. But I try to be a little more accurate and a little less excitable.
Hey, I think that's probably why you get the people following you that you do is because, hey, this guy's shooting me straight. He isn't just telling me something that, I want to hear. He's actually telling me something that we need to hear, and he's explaining it. So, yeah. But Kevin, I know that, you're doing this full time, and you have probably tons of sponsors to help advertise and do whatnot, If then there's anyone here you want to thank for letting you do what you do, I mean, obviously your wife.
Yeah. And I will tell you, she the fact that she has put up with all of the madness that I put her through all the time, and the countless hours, and the sudden notice of, "Oh, hey, I gotta go cover this storm. Good luck with the kids." You know, um, None of this would be possible without her support, without her, being willing to just roll with the punches. Um, she's also encouraged me to, at times, follow that crazy idea. I'm not really a risk taker by nature. And, starting this thing was a risk, and sometimes there are risks involved with this business. But, she encourages me, and I mentioned the imposter syndrome. It's like, who who the heck do I think I am going up here and doing this stuff? But she's able to help encourage me to, to keep going and to trust my instincts and make these things happen. But yeah, I mean, the sponsors that support this brand, obviously none of this would be possible, without their support. And every time I look up, I've got somebody else that's interested in it. And I feel terrible because I don't, back when I had two or three, I feel like I was constantly in communication and, hey, visiting, how's it going? And now I don't really get to do that as much. But Jimmy Porch has been there from day one. The funny story is that I had another sponsor we were getting ready to put pen to paper, and he had it was an event rentals company. We were getting ready to sign a deal and make him my first sponsor when the pandemic hit.
Oh, man.
Completely sloshed, his company, slowed everything down. He had to switch gears. Smart guy, he was able to kinda, turn on a heel and continue having success, but not in the way that, we could advertise. So Jimmy Porch and I were literally in line to vote one day, and he turned to me and said, "Hey, I heard you were maybe looking for sponsors." And what was weird, I hadn't said anything about that, but this other guy was mutual friends, so I think he might have,
Okay.
"Hey, would you be interested in this?" And then Synergy Roofing, I've been working with them for a very long time. And they've been, of course, roofing and weather is
Oh, that goes hand in hand.
that was a natural relationship that we built there. Um, I mean, Methodist and Midlothian, not only do I trust my care to them, but they've been great sponsors and supporters as well. Andrea Walton, insurance up in, State Farm Insurance up in Red Oak. Obviously, weather and insurance goes hand in hand.
Oh,
Well,
absolutely.
it's always fun to kind of talk about the weather tie-ins with a lot of these guys, but, Liberty Tree Service, I don't know how many times I've said in the middle of a live stream, "Well, those storms are knocking your trees down, but if you need to get them cleaned up, call Liberty." The mid live stream plug sometimes, I can hear my wife laughing in the other room. She's like, "Really? You pulled that together?" So, I mean, Rail Yard Park here in Waxahachie, which I have to plug, October 4th of this year, we'll be having a little party down at Rail Yard Park to celebrate 10 years of me doing this.
I did see that. That is awesome. We're gonna be there.
So 12 o'clock, October 4th, food trucks, and we'll have Bounce House and DJ Alex will be down there. We'll have a good time. But I mentioned the Motorplex, they're sponsors as well. And Cool Hand Electric, Worth Collecting, All About Dogs up in Midlothian, Bahama Plumbing, the City of Venice. One of the things that I've been able to do in this business too, with some of these event venues, is I can go beyond just the regular forecasting. I actually get to talk to them. They'll call me up and say, "Hey, Motorplex will say, 'Hey, I got a race coming this weekend. It looks rainy. What are we looking at?'" So I'll actually put together a briefing email and send it out to these people, say, "Hey, this is kind of what you're looking at. Be ready for this with your events," that sort of thing. And that's taught me so much about how these venues handle that. Scarborough Renaissance Festival, they're getting ready to do this kind of rebrand of their fall festivities.
Yeah.
I've already been contacted about that. I think it's Scarborough's Hollow, something like that.
Yeah, yes, because Screams is not there anymore,
Correct.
and so they're doing some kind of fall Halloween
Yeah,
type
yeah, yeah.
deal. Yeah.
And I really, really love that because as a dad, Screams is not really something that I could take my kids to, and childcare is not easy to get. So this opens an opportunity for me to take the kids with me, and we go to Scarborough every year. I mean, it's just it's a pilgrimage for us. It's part of our spring, and now in the fall, it's a little more open to the whole family, and I'll be part of that as well. So, I'll be keeping them apprised of the weather conditions as we get into the weekends and that sort of thing. But um, I have to mention KTX Transport as well. The cool story there, Daryl Kosaurus and I grew up together, and we started businesses around the same time.
Okay.
And so, we're both dads, we're both entrepreneurs, and it's been really fun to talk through those things and to kind of, we'll go out to lunch and we'll kind of look at each other and go, we're like grown-ups now. We're like doing grown-up stuff. Like, who told us we could be trusted with a business? Like he's got like employees and, a big warehouse and all these kind of, and we're kind of looking at each other going, are we sure we're doing this right?
Right.
Are we sure we're old enough for this?
Right. Like, who let us in charge?
So, he's been sponsoring the weekend outlook and that kind of stuff for a long time. But so many of these businesses, these are all mostly small businesses and local, folks. And to not only be able to promote these folks, but I've done business with really, I think all of them at least once or twice. And all quality people. I don't know if I mentioned Heritage Air. Heritage Air doesn't actually charge you extra to visit your house on the weekend.
Oh, really?
How phenomenal is that? I had my AC go out in June, of course. It was late July, so it was like the worst possible time. And capacitor. Apparently, a lot of capacitors were blowing at that point. One of the things I learned from them is they'll actually come out and do like a checkup on your house and check your components so that you can actually see before it gets hot if it's getting low or if something's weakening and might run out. So that way you can replace it in May or April instead of getting caught in the middle of August,
For
that kind of thing.
sure.
So all of these companies, I've been able to work with them and be a patient or, a patient in Methodist Millennium, but a customer and that kind of thing and learn how these folks roll. It's always a pleasure to be able to promote them because I know that they're good folks. I know they're local, and it's all about local businesses all supporting each other. There are several of these businesses that they all kind of work together amongst themselves as well. So to be able to foster some of those relationships is great as well. So definitely support small businesses because it's rough out there.
Oh,
I've I've
absolutely.
I've learned the hard way how tough it is and how scary it is to start a business of your own. And these folks have made it possible for me.
Man, that is awesome. Man, well, yeah. Keep it local and help it, help your local guy out, help your local small business out, that absolutely. But Kevin, man, I just want to say thank you very much for your time coming to the show today. Learned a lot. Hopefully the listeners learned a lot as well. Learned about the man behind, South Metro Weather.
Thanks for having me out. These little kind of local media avails I always enjoy. 'Cause there's not any gotcha questions or anything like that. It's just a conversation. And
Absolutely.
it's not often that I get to get out of the studio and kind of talk about how things are behind the scenes and the reality behind it. And I'm sure plenty of people have seen me at HEB. I like to tell people, people talk about how great I am, and I tell them, look, I'm really not that cool. I put on a good show, but I'm just a nerd. I'm one of the guys on Big Bang Theory when it comes down to it, right? That's my favorite show, one of my favorite shows.
Okay.
And I can go from covering one of these weather events to wearing my wife out with some 20-minute lecture about something that happened in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863. So, there's I put on a good show, but I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a nerd. I'm just a Ellis County kid trying to figure out how this whole world thing's supposed to work.
And then, but a heart for weather, for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I, for whatever reason, just could not shake it. And eventually it consumed me. So we're just going to see how far this goes.
Awesome. Well, but I hope for the best. Maybe one day I'll take a look, see behind the curtain at Southwest, or I'm sorry, South Metro Weather.
We'll do that. We'll show you around.
That'd be awesome.
It's a pretty quick tour, but yeah, we're great. We'll show you how people.
All right, okay. Well, man, thank you very much for coming out, man.